Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you happy?
Yes.
Good. The Dalai Lama says, happy people don't cause trouble. They solve problems. And don't you think that's true?
Absolutely.
This is a teaching, not a preaching. And we draw wisdom from wherever we may find it. We're focused, of course, on the work of the wonderful Dr. Ernest Holmes, a spiritual genius of the 20th century, whose effect in our life is profound. And he's behind some of the most wonderful ideas about who humans are and what they have a right to expect in his clear statement that spirit is within, that God is everywhere, all at once, all the time, all of it, in equal measure, and there is no other power. So there's no conflict. There's no opposition. There's nothing fighting for anything. It's all love expressing. And that's our teaching in a nutshell. But how do we use it? Some of the great wisdom down through the ages, I know you have heard this one. It's one of my favorites. When you're up against something, this too shall pass. They didn't say how long it would take, though. That's the problem. And they can't, because our experience of time and time passing is highly individual. It has to do with our perception. It has to do with what we think is real. It has to do with what we think we have a right to expect and who we are. But these little tidbits really catch our attention. And you'll notice in any bookstore nowadays, there's a whole section of quick fixes, the ABCs of perfect relationship, prosperity 1, 2, 3, how to lose your belly fat overnight. That one doesn't work. I keep trying it. But today I'm going to jump on that bandwagon of simple solutions because I've got something that really does work. And it's called 6 Magic Words. So the first 3, let's just jump right into it. The first 3 magic words are up until now. Now, I'm going to offer some suggestions that probably doesn't have anything to do with anyone here, but maybe somebody you know. Up until now, I've been struggling financially. Up until now, my relationships have ended badly. Up until now, I seem to lack purpose and passion. I'm not sure what my purpose in life is. Up until now. Up until now, I've had some health challenges. Sometimes I'm sick and sometimes I'm well, and it goes back and forth. Anybody can relate to any of these on any level. All right, so being aware of what's so up until now is extremely important. And you can make up your own, but it's very important that we allow ourselves to be a little bit uncomfortable about that and very honest and therefore a little vulnerable. But that's the key to the first step of making lasting changes in our life, is knowing what needs to be changed, right? Yeah. All right, so up until now, and in our workshop today, we're going to work with this idea and how to do it. The next 3 magic words are from now on. And that's where we would say what you would like instead. It's one of my favorite questions. If someone comes to me for counseling and they tell me their story and their problem, I always ask them, what would you like instead? Because you have a choice, right? We have a choice, and we have a mind that can look at different options and choose one and say, that's what I would like instead from now on. And it's more than an affirmation. Affirmations are an aspect of this, but this is an actual experience of moving out of up until now into from now on. But what's important is the space between it. What's in that space? That's the quantum field of all possibility. That's the realm of your potential. The space between up until now and from now on is where God is, if you will. It's where spirit resides. It's where anything is possible. And in that space, there is no time, no action, nothing but a we could say, a quivering potential, just waiting to be activated by us. But we have to go there. It's imperative that we shift from the past or the future into that reality. What is that reality? It's more than now, it's all there is. I call it reality with a capital R. The other day on my blog, I write every day. It's my practice. I want to read you just the first paragraph rather than try to remember it, which I won't. It said, for most people, the attention is either in remembrance or projection. Thinking of the past and anticipating the future are the two most common states of mind. We also must notice the quality of those states. Are we remembering with guilt, regret, remorse, resentment? Are we fearing the future, imagining all sorts of worst-case scenarios? What lies between those opposite poles is now, and the present moment is where all the creative juice is. It's where all the power is. So reality is the awareness of aliveness. You know, there are times in our life, maybe they're peak moments, or they're in meditation, or they're in moments of great love where we feel our own aliveness, don't we? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Children do. Children feel their own aliveness all the time. They're just strutting around alive, right? Until we talk them out of it. But it's a very spiritual state of mind, and it's one that we need to cultivate. You can't do it in the future or the past. It's not where it is. It's in this beautiful quantum field in between, up until now and from now on. So when we go there, you can image it like this. Anybody ever do archery? Yeah, in high school sometimes. So when the archer has the bow and he places the arrow in it and draws it back, he doesn't just go boop. He holds it back, or she does. And what is it doing? It's resting in its own potential. It's gathering energy. It's gathering momentum. Think of this as a thought. Think of this as a new thought. And so you're pulling yourself away from what is. You're pulling yourself away from up until now. You're pulling yourself away from now on. And you're just sitting in that potential, gathering energy. And when you let that new thought fly, whoosh, it has direction. It has momentum. It has consciousness. It has purpose. It knows where to land. And where it lands creates something. And that something will be like the thought that you gave it to create. So we have to draw away from the action. There's an ancient saying, Ernest Holmes quotes this in the Signs of Mind book, but I believe it comes from the Upanishads of India. It says, to the one who can perfectly practice inaction, all things are possible. That's a paradox. And most of spirituality is a paradox, right? To the one who can perfectly practice inaction, all things are possible. To the one who can suspend time and space for the moment, go into that field of aliveness and perceive something and formulate it into an idea or a thought, anything is possible. And that's actually what we're doing. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. But when we do it intentionally, that's called spiritual practice. When we do it intentionally, there's nothing as powerful as that. So you can think of it like sitting in a powerful car, a big Mustang or a Camaro or something, and you're in neutral and it's just idling. All that power is there, but it doesn't do anything until you shift out of neutral and put your foot on the accelerator, right? So these little images really depict how the mind handles ideas. We take them in, we sit with them, we identify ourselves with them, and then we let them fly into possibility on the wings of an affirmation, on the wings of our belief of knowing that what we seek is ours now. So this paradox doesn't mean we don't do anything in time and space. It means we must first prepare before we do anything and take our attention to that field and do nothing for a while. So I'm going to invite you, we're going to do this in our workshop, but just for today, if you feel like it, just close your eyes for a moment and simply be aware of being. Now, notice how fast your thoughts go to the past or the future. Maybe, I wonder what the cookies are today, right? That's a future thought. Just sit there for a minute and see if you can stay just present, just present, just present. Okay, now open your eyes. You see how you can watch your own thoughts? Someone asked me recently, Carol, what's the purpose of meditation? And I said, it's to become aware that you're not your thoughts. Because when you sit in meditation regularly, with enough commitment to stay there, you begin to notice your thoughts just flipping across the screen of your consciousness. And pretty soon, it's going to occur to you, who's watching? Those thoughts are just impulses from a collection in the subconscious. And we begin to realize, oh, I'm not my thoughts. I can choose what to think. And you just watch them, and that's really what meditation is to have that awareness that you are the observer of the mind. You are the watcher. You are the one who can choose to think whatever you want to think. And it's important because thought is creative, right? Absolutely. Okay, so the value is that we learn that most of our thoughts have to do with the past or the future, and they're really not about now. And we train our mind to be more present in this moment and to identify ourselves in a new way. Self-identity is everything. Have you learned that one? They asked me if I changed, what opinion have I changed in the last few years? I can't think of any, but I've changed my self-identity many times. From the identity I had as a teenager, as a young woman, as a married woman, as a divorced woman, changing your identity until you get to I am. Right? The great Om, I am. And that's part of our practice, is changing our self-identity. So we begin to see the past as sort of like an old movie. You know, when I was about 7, my sister and I had a lot of freedom, so we went to movies probably that kids nowadays wouldn't be allowed into. But we went to see the movie Frankenstein. It scared me half to death. And do you remember that scene, if you've ever seen the original one, where he suddenly appears in a window with that square head with the things coming out? And I was so scared. I wouldn't sleep by a window for years after that. I recently saw that clip on TV, and it had no effect on me whatsoever. It's like, it's meaningless now because I've changed my identity. I'm no longer a scared little girl. Well, that's what we're always doing. If we're using this teaching in a very positive and intentional way, we're actually shifting our identity from a label that we've attached to ourselves based on what occurred in time and space to what is true about us. And in that field between the two, up until now and from now on, is where we find that self again. It has no conditions attached to it. So is there any value then in blaming, shaming, or naming somebody else as the source of your experience? That's a huge one, isn't it? Most of the world thinks it's smart or intelligent to blame other people for their experience. It's kind of what people do. And one of the great shifts in our life when we come into a teaching like this, and one of the great challenges is when we get it. There's nobody but us. There's nobody but our perception. There's nothing out there but our perception. And there's nobody to blame for anything. People participated in our lives. People participated in certain events. But what we did with it had nothing to do with anybody else. So it really isn't what happens to us. It's what we do with that. It's what we do with the reaction. It's how we respond or react. And what do we call ourselves in the process? And that's the key to liberating ourselves from the past or fear of the future. So I had an experience once when I had a center in Tennessee. I'll tell you more about this in the workshop, but the gist of it was, I got a phone call at about 2 a.m, and this young woman said, "You don't know me, you've never met me, but someone told me you might be able to help me." I said, "Okay, what?" She told me the most horrific story. I mean, just incredibly horrible abuse, childhood abuse, and Satanism, and horrible stuff. And after she went on and on. I talked to her till 6 o'clock in the morning. She went on, and as she paused after an hour or two, I said, "Well, aren't you glad that isn't happening now?" She said, "What?" You know, when you hit someone in the right place, they can't hear the question. "What did you say?" she said. I said, "Aren't you glad it's not happening now?" Because in her mind it was. Right? It's as real as it was when she was 9 years old. She said, "Say that again." I said, "Aren't you glad it's not happening now? Because who you are is whole and intact in this moment and has never been damaged nor diminished by anything that's ever happened to you. If that were true, you wouldn't be talking to me." She said, "No one's ever talked to me like this. Where does this come from?" And so I started telling her a little bit about the teaching. But at the end of the call, 4 or 5 hours later, she said, "You don't know this, but when I called you, I was sitting here with a loaded gun in my lap. And I was going to take myself out of this." She says, "I can't tell you what this has meant to me. I've never heard anyone talk like this." And then she asked me a few questions. "Do you mean all that horrible stuff that happened to me did not actually hurt me?" I said, "That's right. It can't. Outer events can never touch the soul and can never diminish or damage who we really are." That's what we find in between observations of what has been and what we would like. That's where we find this whole self. And it's only from the whole self that you can actually make a declaration in spiritual mind treatment. You can actually make a statement and expect it to come true from your wholeness, not from the broken self, right? So I invite you earnestly never to identify yourself as broken and never to identify yourself as a victim. We aren't. Things happen we don't like, but we're still in the power seat. We determine what it means. You know, there's no meaning to life except what we give it, right? The meaning that we give to things is what they mean. So we're always in that place of power. Ernest Holmes, the founder of this teaching, said, "We must continually remind ourselves of the power of the word and our ability to use it. And the word comes from what we are most sure of. It comes from what we believe to be true." So doesn't it make sense that what we believe to be true ought to come from that place of no conditions, no past and no future, but simply aliveness and being and recognizing our wholeness? So up until now has no authority over us, really. It's just information. That's when I think about the past, I think it's just good information. That's all it is. If we want real change, we have to allow ourselves to enter into the realm of not so comfortable. I watch, when I get ready for Sunday morning, I always watch CBS Sunday morning. It's a great show. They have these wonderful interviews. And last week, they had a story about a young man. And his story was when he was in high school, he was still quite young, he was really good at football, really good at soccer, really good at basketball. So he went out for the swim team because he didn't know how to swim. And the only reason he got on the team was because the team was so terrible that their goal was not to be disqualified in any swim meet, right? But so he decided he was going to learn to swim. And he did, and he got so good at it that he helped them go to the national championships because he was the last man on the relay team and he swam like his hair was on fire, and they won that meet. So the interviewer said to him, "Why would you do that? If you knew you could be a star in basketball, football, or soccer, why did you do something that you didn't know how to do?" And this young man said, and they repeated this 3 times, it was such an important statement. He says, "If I couldn't handle not being good at something, how could I call myself a successful person?" You have to think about that. So if I can't handle being a little bit uncomfortable about what was up until now, what right do I have to claim my wholeness? Right? If that means something to me, if I'm embarrassed or ashamed or all of that stuff, what does that say about my self-awareness? So it's just information, and we let it go. Because who we are, this intact soul, this download of spirit, this expression of the one, is so beautiful and so unique and so needed in the world that we want to make sure we come through as clean as possible. We want to make sure we give our gifts at the highest level we can. We have gifts to give. Every one of us has gifts to give. And I'm not talking about occupation or profession. I'm talking about just by being you. Just walking in a room, you can change it, can't you? You know what Emerson, who I love, said? "Who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying." Yeah. Have you ever been at a party and somebody walks in the room and everybody's head turns to see who came in because there's some energy there? Yeah, and each one of us has that opportunity to be the presence in human form. And I don't mean all divine and godly. I mean just intact, whole, eager to meet and greet and to be present and express ourselves as lovingly as we can. So there's value in being honest about how things have been up until now, and are asking ourselves, what would we welcome instead? Not what do I want, but what would I welcome? We should ask that about the world as well. So by declaring it so now, we kind of kickstart our thoughts on a higher level, and automatically we start to talk about ourselves in a different way, and we're raising our own vibration. See, everything is energy and everything is vibrational, right? That's why people turn their heads when someone walks in who has a very big circle of energy around them, because people are caught in. Have you ever heard that Hopi Indian story about the little critters that are hanging onto the edge of the river? And the river's moving, and they're just hanging on. And the Hopi Indian says, "Let go. Let the river take you into the center of the flow. Now look around and see who's in there with you." You see, that's what we're doing all the time. There's no such thing as the law of attraction. We don't attract anything, we generate it. I lived in Hawaii for years, and I used to watch the old guys on the rocks with the hukilau nets, these huge, heavy nets, and it's quite an art. And they would stand there and they'd wait till they'd watch the waves, and then they'd throw their net out into the sea. And all the ama come a-swimming to me, right? They pull the nets in and it's full of fish. And that's how consciousness works. Who you are is a vibration that harmonizes with others of the same or similar vibration. And that goes for everything, conditions, and it shows up where you are. It's not really true that you're pulling it in. It's just appearing. Have you ever had things just appear in your life? When you change your mind, that's why. So in that space between up until now and from now on, we are intending to raise our vibration, that we might push off from ordinariness, push off from those old relationships, that old tired job, whatever it is, and get into the flow of possibility and see who's in there with us, see what we can manifest and demonstrate because of who we are. So today in our workshop, we will push off and start a new series of cause and effect, and I hope you'll join me. You know, Our wonderful methodology called spiritual mind treatment is not prayer. It's way, way above prayer, because it's not about asking for, it's not about petitioning or begging. It's a declaration of what we know to be true based on what we find within this field. And spiritual mind treatment is so effective because it's changing our mind. We don't have to change God's mind. God is already giving everything that we could. You know what Jesus said? The kingdom's within. The kingdom has been given. It's already here. Take it. Push off, get in the flow, and let it happen. So I really would love for you to stay for the workshop after, and we'll really get into this in a fun way. Don't be scared. I won't confront you with anything. All right, so I'm going to now go into a spiritual mind treatment to close this morning. And let's begin by recognizing what our heart knows, what we knew as little kids, what we were born knowing because we come from it, and that is there is something wonderful appearing as the universe and everything in it. Something beyond description, something powerful, something that is love and intelligence in exactly the right relationship to produce the third thing. The third thing is the universe and every sentient life within it. From the cosmic to the atomic, one thing being all, dancing in its own aliveness, taking form, the invisible becoming the visible, the idea becoming the thing, the heartfelt desire becoming the experience. All of it is pushing through us, not to us, coming from us, by means of us, because we are that God individualized. We are a personification of it. We can never be separate from it. There is no other source of anything but this field of consciousness. And so today we recommit our life, our mind, our private moments to the knowing of that, to cultivating that in ourselves, to remembering what we knew when we were 2 years old, to bring forth that alive, charming, delighted, magical, creative self and pour it into everything we do, just like Spirit is pouring itself into everything that lives. So we know that for us personally, we know it for this group, this congregation, we know it for this center, that it is a light in the world, it is a resource, it is a vibration that is irresistible to all who are seeking a higher level of living. These doors are open, and we dance together. And so in deep, deep gratitude for Ernest Holmes, Thomas Trord, Emerson, Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, all of them who knew this truth, scientists and teachers and gurus and saints and sages who knew this truth, kept it alive sometimes at their own peril. We are grateful. This is the time, this is the place, we are the people. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and so we take our place as co-creators of a world that works for everyone. In peace and gratitude, we let it be so, and so it is.